Okay, firstly, can I take the opportunity to welcome you to Manchester in the northwest? And you've missed the heat wave, it's raining, and you're all going to go away with this preconception that Manchester, it always rains, and it's absolutely not true. It doesn't always rain. You missed the sunshine. It's great to have our national conference here in Manchester and in the northwest. And it's a city with strong significance in terms of transport infrastructure, and in this complex of buildings and spaces as well. So a really good choice, IHBC, for a venue. So as Ella says, I'm Catherine Dewar. I'm the Planning Director for the North West for Historic England, based here in Manchester. And I've worked for English Heritage Historic England for 15 years now. Scary. The last 2 in Manchester. And it's a privilege to work in this area with the industrial heritage that we have in the North West. Get the button right. And it's a region of superlatives. So some of you have already seen on the tours yesterday, we're on the site of the terminus of the world's first intercity passenger railway. It's hard to say all of that. And this station building is the world's oldest surviving passenger railway station. It's mind-blowing, isn't it, really? And there are many other firsts in science and industry in Mosey as a museum, and you'll possibly hear more about these on your tour with Mark later. The Bridgewater Canal was the first purpose-built industrial canal system in England by James Brindley. And the Castlefield Basin, the site of the first canal warehouse, and that was built by the Duke of Bridgewater. And the first and only, it's not a great slide, but the first and only swing aqueduct in the world is the Barton Swing Aqueduct on that Bridgewater Canal. And that's just Manchester, so let's have a bit of a quiz. The tone was set last night for having fun in planning, so let's have fun. I'm not going to get a ukulele out, though. I draw the line. So, where is the world's first enclosed, I can't say this, non-combustible dock warehouse system? Come on. Yeah, where? Yay, Albert Dock, thank you. Albert Dock in Liverpool, you've got to join in. 1840 by Jesse Hartley, amazing, amazing place. And where were the world's first hydraulic warehouse hoists? Can't hear.
Manchester.
No. It's a trick question, it's the same place. Liverpool's Albert Dock. Okay, what about the longest non-stop motorway in the country? God, it's the M6. M6. Come on, think northwest. M6. M6. I thought that one was easy, but obviously not. Come on, wake up, everyone. Okay, what about England's first ever motorway? Yay, that's better, thank you. The Preston Bypass, which opened in 1958, and the M1 opened in 1959. Everybody thinks the M1 was the first. Now, getting to a bit of a darker subject, where was England's first ever railway fatality, or the world's first ever railway fatality, I suppose? There's too many people talking now, though. Edgehill. It was a William Huskisson MP who was killed on the Manchester to Liverpool railway line on the day it opened by Stephenson's rocket. Unlucky. He was stood on the track when the rocket came in the other direction and he couldn't get out of the way quick enough. And this wonderful memorial is to be found in St James's Cemetery in Liverpool. Okay, final one. The longest conservation area in the country. Settle, somebody said it, thank you. Settle Carlisle Railway. And the conservation area is 72 miles long, and at its narrowest point, it's only 6 feet wide. Okay, enough fun. So I think a keynote speech is to set the tone for a conference and challenge some of your thinking. So I'm going to purposefully provoke and prod you and ask questions and challenge you to think about some of the points that I raise after the conference and beyond into the forthcoming weeks and months. But first of all, I need to run through the current political context that we're in. And of course, post-election, there's some uncertainty about government's government's thinking, its plans, but certainly the government that we had 2 weeks ago put infrastructure really high up on its agenda. And I'm sure that won't change with a new government. And they've provided us with the infrastructure to manage our infrastructure. So the Infrastructure and Projects Authority works with industry to ensure projects are delivered effectively and efficiently and improve performance over time. They work on the overall project delivery system, so the processes, the people and the projects, and they measure how well that system's performing so that lessons can be learnt. And they report directly to the Treasury and the Cabinet Office in government. We also have a National Infrastructure Commission to provide government with a clear picture of our infrastructure needs and issues, and they have their own budget and operational independence from government. And Lord Adonis was appointed as chair of that commission this year. And the IPA works to its National Infrastructure Delivery Plan, and that's government's plans to deliver economic infrastructure over that 5-year period. And you can see from the slide the variety of infrastructure that it covers, a huge variety, but we're just looking at transport infrastructure today, of course. The IPA sets out its projects in its National Infrastructure Pipeline, good name, and this identifies 600 projects and programmes, major projects and programmes that are ongoing, and it identifies a budget of 425 billion towards those projects, and transport accounts for 32% of that. So let's look at transport in detail. Roads, there are 91 projects and programmes within that pipeline. That includes things like smart motorways, and if anybody lives around here and has travelled on the M60 recently, which is the road that goes round Greater Manchester, you'll have been stuck on the roadworks. No pain, no gain, we've got to get through it. But they're converting it to a smart motorway, and it's the same with the M6. And there's 12.6 billion in the pot for roads. Rail, there's 95 projects and programmes, and 46 billion alone has been allocated to Network Rail. And it's things like HS3, Leeds to Manchester line, the Crossrail project in the southeast, and electrification of the Great Western Line from London to Cardiff. Airports and ports, this is Speak Airport. We all heard about Heathrow, the decision about Heathrow. But Manchester's also getting £1 billion worth of investment, which is great for me because it's 10 minutes away from me now. Extra port capacity at London and Liverpool and Hull, and there's 5.4 billion in the pot for ports and airports. And our customers as a sector when it comes to transport infrastructure are the likes of Network Rail, Highways England, Transport for London. Government's also setting up Transport for the North, and that's due to be established as a statutory body this year. Colleagues in Transport and Highways departments, obviously, but also politicians. And it's worth noting that the new Metro mayors, all of them men, have you noticed that? Elected to lead the new combined authorities have responsibility for transport plans and transport infrastructure. And Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester has got £900 million pot for spending overall, not all on transport, but there's money in those budgets, so it's worth keeping that in mind. So all in all, government is serious about infrastructure. And at the National Infrastructure Forum last week, the chair of HS2 said that the delivery of new stations and new infrastructure will really have a big impact on the towns and the cities that those rail lines will travel through. So in the northwest, Crewe there's huge potential for Crewe in Cheshire to gain from all of that. But not all of that work will be dealt with as national infrastructure projects. There'll be smaller scale projects, reuse of railway goods sheds and changes to stations that we would all probably get involved in. So let's turn our attention now to our approach as a sector within all of that context. The historic infrastructure that we're going to be celebrating and admiring the next few days are really astounding examples of innovation. And I've already run through the biggest this, the first that, and this is Stanley Dock in Liverpool. And that humongous tobacco warehouse, you've really got to stand next to it to appreciate how big it is. was supposedly the biggest brick structure ever built at its time. I'm sure other people will say the same thing. I think Stockport Viaduct claims to be the same thing. But the Victorian engineers in particular were pioneers, and railway mania or railway fever in the 1830s and 40s resulted in massive changes for commerce and society, because this was when passengers started to be transported, not just commodities and stuff. So engineers like George Stephenson and Brunel saw the huge opportunities that these innovations would bring. But of course, not everybody was of the same view. And just like today, there was huge opposition to the railways then. Railways were cutting through the centres of towns and beautiful landscapes and even medieval castles. The pioneers were vandals, and opponents of the railway said that the rail lines break up and desecrate the countryside. But instead, those promoting them claimed that they would make use of the land and architecturally embellish the countryside. And are these familiar arguments to us? Today we value all of this stuff, and this is why, because they did it with style, and they did it with an eye for longevity, and the quality of the materials, and a real passion for infrastructure. There was civic pride all built up in all of that, and they wanted to build the best as their legacy. We mustn't forget that it was their private money, of course, that was put to public good. So, of course, there was also serious financial and reputational gain for these investors and engineers. But that civic pride was there. And today we're in a period of high spending on infrastructure and in an unprecedented infrastructure investment, in particular in railways. And I do think there's a genuine desire to do the right thing and to have that same ethos as the Victorian investors, for the public good at least. So what's changed in our approach as a nation and as a culture? Well, I think we're obviously in a time of drastically reduced budgets. We don't have the money that these philanthropists had, and acute scrutiny of public money as well. You know, how much did it cost, especially with people tweeting on social media all of the time and questioning all of these judgments. Call it value engineering, but we're trying to reduce the cost of everything to keep the price down as much as possible. And as a result, I think we're losing, if we haven't lost already, that passion for quality. And I think that public scrutiny means we're not taking the brave decisions that we should do. Of the recently announced RIBA National Awards, 2 of the 48 projects could be described as infrastructure, and I'm kind of being kind there, because one of them is BA's I-360, which is the observation tower in Brighton. Well, it transports people up and down a tower, so it's transport infrastructure, isn't it? And Chatham Dockyard, fantastic visitor facilities at Chatham Dockyard, both really good projects. And the RICS has infrastructure category in its awards annually. And this year, of the 9 English regions, there were 8 infrastructure awards, no highly commended, and only 3 of those were transport projects. One of those was Gloucester Service Station, which is a brilliant service station. Cracking cooked breakfast, I can guarantee. Let's look at the Garden Bridge. I'm going to tread carefully here because I know how contentious it was. And I kind of read with fascination in the media the for and against arguments about the Garden Bridge. So, new pedestrian bridge across the Thames, exciting. Designed by Thomas Heatherwick, so, you know, undoubtedly getting design quality high up the agenda. It was privately owned, remember those Victorian philanthropists, with restricted access to control management and allow maintenance at night. So it's not that public a bridge. It was reported as well that there would be restrictions on use. Cyclists were going to be asked to dismount. They were going to be tracking your phone as you crossed the bridge, or what the papers say, of course. Commercial use of the bridge to allow corporate entertaining in order to fund its construction and management. And claimed that it'll ruin the sweeping vista from Westminster to St Paul's. Loads of issues, not least the funding, obviously. But whatever you think of the way it was going to be managed and funded, it was an innovative proposal, wasn't it? Quite brave. And you, like me, travel abroad to Europe and come back feeling really jealous about what they do over there. Look at that. That's a bridge. They take risks with their infrastructure. So beautiful. And this is a new road in Spain reaching elegantly across that pristine landscape. Challenging, but they've done it really well, I think. And this is a great bit of layering of history, because this is the new road from Santander to Madrid, and it's taken from the Roman road heading to Compostela. So you've got that lovely layering of history there. And this replaces a lower grade road in the valley, and instead of widening that, they just plonked it halfway up the hillside. Lovely. The way they bury their, I've gone too far, the way they bury their car parking beneath public squares in historic towns, you know, would we gasp in horror at digging up the archaeology or the cost of digging out all of that space? Back to France, this is Marseille, and this is the Museum of European and Mediterranean Civilizations. That's not easy to say either. And this is a new high-level pedestrian bridge crossing a busy road from the escarpment into the 17th century Fort Saint-Jean. And I love the way it just crashes straight into that building. It's got a beautiful scar to tell the story of the way it does it. It's brave, and I think that works really beautifully. I can see some of you don't agree. You're all looking horrified. I think it's done really well. Said I was going to challenge you. So at this point, we can't not take a look at a scheme closer to home that challenged Historic England as an organisation. And some of you have already been to have a look, I believe. Was there a tour yesterday to talk about the Ordsall Cord? Right, it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow, okay. So Network Rail proposed a link track to allow better connections between the Manchester stations to free up congestion at stations in Manchester and making that city network more efficient. All strong public benefits. And the proposed location cut right across the original Manchester to Liverpool line, which, if you were taking note at the beginning, is the first intercity rail line in the world. It's quite significant. And just at the end of the road here, of course, where I've lost my direction now, I'm inside a room, but just at the end of the road here somewhere, it involved the demolition of a Grade 2 bridge and abutments and slicing across that railway line and ceasing that physical connection into this complex of buildings. So undoubted harm to internationally significant heritage assets. But what of those public benefits? Historic England objected strongly to the proposals, and it went to public inquiry, and we fought the public inquiry. And our case was based on the fact that there was an alternative route and that the harm caused wasn't necessary to get the public benefits. It was a cheaper way of doing it, but it wasn't the only way of doing it. And it was obviously a more nuanced case than that, and a nuanced decision than we've got time to discuss this morning. But were we, Historic England, right to take that position? How were we, as an organisation, embracing that innovative approach that I'm talking about? Question. You'll maybe see from Mark's tour later or tomorrow that they're building the bridge. An arch bridge has been lifted into position and the tracks have been lined up, and Stevenson's 1830 bridge has been repaired and revealed, so there have been some heritage benefits there. We lost the inquiry, but the inspector agreed that harm to assets was substantial, but felt that the public benefits outweighed that harm. So what can we learn from this as an organisation? Well, Network Rail could talk to us earlier in the process, and we have a very good working relationship with them now, and we're working closely with them on a number of electrification projects, looking at bridges and particularly on the Trans-Pennine line from Staley Bridge to Selby, looking at those bridges and providing them with the certainty and the understanding of the significance of the bridges, so that very early on in their design process they have that level of understanding. And this brings me to my main question for the day. How can we influence decision-making in relation to infrastructure schemes and thereby, as a sector, become more relevant? Firstly, do we have the right skills in the sector for schemes of such scale and complexity and such specialist asset types? We do have experts in the sector, and we'll be hearing from some of them in the next couple of days. And there are amenity groups, the Railway Heritage Trust. Have we got anybody from the Railway Heritage Trust? No? Okay. Transport providers are engaging with the design, quality and heritage agenda So Network Rail has committed to setting up a design review panel by September this year. Highways England has appointed a cultural heritage officer, and the Canal and River Trust, as a charity, has appointed a national heritage manager, and Nigel's with us today. But infrastructure projects are basically no different from dealing with change to a small building or new building a conservation area, I think. Many of these programmes, these big, scary programmes, are made up of lots of individual little projects that will have a cumulative impact. But it all comes down to how those changes would affect the particular significance of that heritage asset. It's not whether it's listed or not. It's not whether it's in a conservation area or whether it affects the setting of a park and garden. Buildings and structures aren't significant because they're designated. These buildings we're in aren't significant because they're Grade 1 listed. It's the other way round. These buildings are designated because of their significance. And conservation principles, love them or loathe them, help us to understand and articulate significance. And incidentally, we're working on a review of conservation principles. The fundamentals won't change, but we're just changing some of the language a little bit so that it ties in with the NPPF a bit better. And we'll be consulting on that later on in the next coming months. So keep an eye out for that and do engage with us on that. So significance has to inform our thinking about these projects. This is Newcastle's Central Station. It's Grade 1 listed, 1850 by John Dobson, and just up the road from where Stephenson designed the rocket. And like many city railway stations, up and down the country, it has a huge portico out front, and it's a place of arrival or departure. And these porticos were obviously designed to protect us from the weather. The vehicles of its time would pull into the portico and drop off or pick up passengers, job done. At Newcastle, Network Rail wanted to infill the portico, better arrival to the city, and no doubt to create extra commercial space. You know, we're not daft. But in Newcastle, the portico was a fume-filled, dark, horrible space. It was a horrible arrival to Newcastle. It was a taxi rank with the engines running. It was a drop-off point, and it was a place for general drunken loitering as well. There are many aspects to Central Station's significance, but its significance as a place of arrival or departure, I think, in terms of the portico, remained unharmed, if not enhanced. And yes, the detailing of the glazed infill around all that beautiful architectural detailing was really tricky, but I think this is a good pragmatic solution, and having used that station so many times, this is a far better arrival to Newcastle as a city. You may disagree. Second point I want to make is that change is inevitable. We have to be pragmatic as a sector. So let's go back to those days when we were brave about change and the possibilities that it brings. Yes, many of these proposals may be harmful by their nature, but we have to look for the heritage gains. The celebrated King's Cross development resulted in some harm to assets. We lost some historic buildings in their entirety, I think. But look at the heritage gains of that project. And we have to be pragmatic and look for solutions because resistance is futile, somebody once said. If we take a wholly negative and precious stance, we'll be blocked out of discussions, token gesture consultation, box ticked, thank you very much. If we avoid change to highly designated assets because of their designation, as a sector, we're going to lose credibility. On the other hand, if we find solutions, articulate the significance and why that place, that building or that structure is important, and how the proposed change would affect that significance, and then look for solutions, I think we'll be able to influence. And the decision makers will come back to us for advice and see that involving us is all worthwhile. And at its best, they'll think that we're an invaluable part of the process, and that's where we want to get to. So over the next couple of days, think about how we can all best influence the outcomes when we're working on projects. And we might lose some assets or some significance of assets along the way, but there may be better heritage gains to be had. So thank you for listening. Have a think about that and have a great conference.